Eliza's car rolled to a stop in front of the decaying kindergarten, its once vibrant paint now peeling like dead skin. The chain-link fence sagged under the weight of overgrown ivy, and the swing set creaked in the wind, its empty seats swaying as if pushed by unseen hands. She hadn't planned on coming back. Not after all these years, but the rumors had gnawed at her. Neighbors claimed they heard children singing at night, their voices sweet and haunting, drifting through the empty streets. The front door groaned as she pushed it open, the air inside thick with the scent of mildew and something sharper, like burnt sugar. The hallway stretched before her, littered with broken toys and faded drawings still clinging to the walls. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a child's voice floated through the darkness. A nursery rhyme she didn't recognize, its melody warped and slow. Eliza's breath hitched. She followed the sound, her flashlight beam trembling as it cut through the gloom. The singing seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the cracked tiles, but there was no one there. No footprints in the dust, no signs of life. Just that voice, lilting and wrong, as if the building itself were humming to her. A cold draft brushed her neck, and the singing stopped. Silence pooled around her, heavy and waiting. Then, from the shadows of a nearby classroom, a single, high-pitched giggle. Eliza spun toward it, her pulse roaring in her ears, but the room was empty. Except for the faint, fading imprint of small hands pressed against the grimy window. The air inside the kindergarten was thick with dust, swirling in the dim light that filtered through the broken windows. Eliza's footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as she moved down the hallway, her flashlight cutting through the darkness like a fragile blade. The walls, once brightly painted with cartoon animals and alphabet letters, were now peeling and stained, their cheerful colors muted by years of neglect. Then she heard it, her name. A whisper, so faint it could have been the wind, but it slithered into her ears with unnerving clarity. And Eliza, her breath hitched. There was no wind in these halls, no open windows to carry such a sound. She turned, scanning the shadows, but the classrooms gaped empty, their doors hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. A cold draft brushed the back of her neck. She spun around, and for a heartbeat, she saw it. A small figure at the end of the hall. A child or something shaped like one, its silhouette impossibly dark against the gloom. It stood perfectly still, its face hidden in shadow. Eliza's pulse hammered in her throat. She blinked, and it was gone. The whispers came again, this time from all directions, a chorus of tiny voices murmuring her name. They seemed to seep from the walls themselves, rising and falling like a twisted nursery rhyme. Eliza's hands trembled as she gripped the flashlight tighter. She told herself it was just her imagination, the building playing tricks on her. But the air had grown colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward her, alive and hungry. She took a step back, her boot crunching on something brittle. Looking down, she saw shattered crayons, their wax ground into the floorboards. Tiny handprints, dust, smudged but unmistakable, marked the walls. The whispers grew louder. Eliza, stay with us. A door at the far end of the hallway creaked open on its own. Inside, the darkness pulsed like a living thing. The shadowy child reappeared for just a second, its head tilting as if curious. Then, with a sound like a sigh, it dissolved into the blackness. Eliza's breath came in short, panicked gasps. She wasn't alone. And whatever was here with her wasn't letting her leave. The floorboards creaked under Eliza's feet as she stepped into the abandoned classroom, her flashlight casting long shadows across the peeling wallpaper. The air smelled of mildew and something older, something sour. Then she heard it, a soft, tinkling melody, like a music box winding to life. Her pulse quickened as she followed the sound to a dusty corner, where a small, ornate box sat atop a crumbling bookshelf. Its lid was open, and though it looked decades old, the mechanism inside turned smoothly, filling the room with a lullaby she didn't recognize. The tune was sweet, almost comforting, but there was something wrong with it. The notes were too slow, too deliberate, as if each one was dragging her closer. The temperature dropped as the music played, her breath visible in the sudden chill. The walls around her seemed to breathe, whispering words she couldn't quite make out. Shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, and for a moment, she thought she saw small figures darting just beyond the light. The lullaby grew louder, echoing down the hallway, pulling her forward like a chain around her neck. She tried to resist, to step back, but her feet moved on their own, carrying her deeper into the building. The music box's melody twisted, the notes stretching into something darker, and Eliza realized with a cold dread that the whispers in the walls were singing along. A child's voice, faint but clear, hummed the tune just behind her ear. She spun around, but there was no one there, only the music box, still playing, its song now seeping into her bones. The lullaby wasn't just a song, it was a call, and whatever waited in the darkness had finally heard her answer. The air in the abandoned kindergarten grew thick with the scent of charred wood and old smoke, though Eliza knew no fire had touched these walls in years. As she moved through the empty classrooms, the peeling wallpaper and blackened ceiling tiles told a story she hadn't known before. A sudden rush of cold air made her shiver, and the whispers around her coalesced into a single, mournful cry, a child's voice, choked with fear. Then, the flashback struck like a bolt of lightning. Eliza's vision blurred, and the dilapidated classroom around her transformed. The walls were freshly painted, the air bright with sunlight and laughter. Children's drawings adorned the bulletin boards, and tiny chairs were neatly arranged in a circle. But then, smoke, a scream, panic. Flames licked at the door frames, and the cheerful room dissolved into chaos. Teachers shouted, children wailed, and the exit doors wouldn't budge. Trapped, Eliza gasped as the vision faded, leaving her back in the present, surrounded by ruin. But she wasn't alone. Small figures flickered at the edges of her sight, pale shapes in tattered clothes, their hollow eyes boring into her. One by one, they stepped forward, their tiny fingers curling into fists. Their mouths moved in unison, though no sound came out. Then, as if summoned by her terror, the whispers returned, echoing the same phrase over and over, "You left us." Her stomach twisted. She hadn't been here the day of the fire, she was sure of it. But the children's accusation clung to her like cobwebs. Their faces, twisted in sorrow and rage, filled every shadow. The classroom walls trembled, and the temperature plummeted. Eliza stumbled back, her breath visible in the freezing air. The ghost didn't follow, they only watched, waiting. Eliza stumbled into the bathroom, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something darker, something rotten. The flickering light above her cast jagged shadows across the cracked tiles. She gripped the sink, her knuckles white, and forced herself to look into the shattered mirror. Her reflection stared back, but it wasn't her. The face in the glass was gaunt, hollow-eyed, its skin stretched too tight over sharp bones. The mouth twisted into a smile too wide, too cruel. Eliza recoiled, but the reflection didn't move with her. It stayed grinning, its eyes black pits seeping dark tears. Then, slowly, the reflection's features shifted, melting into the faces of the children she'd seen in the classrooms. Their empty eyes, their gaping mouths frozen in silent screams. A whisper slithered through the room, her name curling around her like a noose. She spun around, but the doorway was empty. Then, from the corner of her vision, she saw it, the small, shadowy figure of a child. It stood at the far end of the hallway, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. The air turned icy, and Eliza's breath fogged in front of her. The child took a step forward, its movements jerky, as if pulled by invisible strings. The mirror behind her cracked further, the glass splintering with a sound like bones breaking. Eliza's reflection was gone now, replaced entirely by the ghostly children, their hands pressing against the glass, straining to reach her. The music box's lullaby swelled from somewhere deep in the building, its melody twisting into something dissonant, wrong. The vengeful spirit took another step. Eliza backed against the wall, her pulse hammering in her throat. The child's lips parted, and a single word echoed through the bathroom, dripping with malice, "Teacher." Eliza staggered backward. Her breath ragged as the children's song swelled around her, a chorus of sweet, high-pitched voices that twisted into something far more sinister. The melody seeped into the walls, the floor, the air itself, vibrating through her bones like a sickness. She clapped her hands over her ears, but the sound only grew louder, warping into a dissonant shriek that clawed at her mind. The flickering light bulb overhead burst with a pop, plunging the hallway into darkness, save for the eerie, pulsing glow emanating from the walls. Then came the blood. Thin rivulets of crimson oozed from the cracks in the plaster, pooling at her feet, creeping toward her like living tendrils. The metallic stench of it filled her lungs, thick and suffocating. Shadows shifted at the edges of her vision, tiny figures emerging from the blackness, their hollow eyes fixed on her, their mouths stretched into unnatural grins. They reached for her, their fingers blackened and skeletal, their whispers threading through the song like razor blades. Eliza tried to scream, but her voice was lost beneath the tide of ghostly singing. The music box's lullaby swirled with the children's voices, a cruel harmony that tugged at her soul. The floor beneath her feet grew slick with blood, and she slipped, crashing onto her knees. The spirits closed in, their tiny hands brushing her shoulders, her hair their touch like ice. Their whispers became clearer now, a single phrase repeated over and over, "Stay with us." The walls pulsed, the blood surging in time with the song, and Eliza realized, too late, that she had never been the one searching. They had been waiting for her all along. The last thing she saw was the flicker of the music box's lid snapping shut, just as the tiny hands closed around her throat. The dawn light filtered through the broken windows of the kindergarten, casting long shadows across the peeling walls and scattered toys. The silence was absolute, a stark contrast to the chorus of ethereal voices that had filled the air the night before. The music box, its mechanism somehow still intact, sat on the floor of the empty classroom, its melody soft but insistent. The lullaby was no longer alone. Now, a faint, trembling voice hummed along with it, a voice that bore an unsettling resemblance to Eliza's. The building itself seemed to exhale, the tension of the night dissolving into an eerie calm. No trace of Eliza remained, no coat left behind, no footprints in the dust. Only the music box, turning slowly, its tune weaving through the hollow halls. Outside, the wind rustled the overgrown grass, carrying the faint sound of children's laughter, though the playground had been empty for decades. In the bathroom, the shattered mirror reflected nothing, no face, no movement. Yet the sound of whispered promises lingered in the air. The spirits had gotten what they wanted. Somewhere beyond the walls of the kindergarten, Eliza's voice entwined with the lullaby, her final cries now just another thread in the tapestry of sorrow that bound the place. The music box played on, its melody an invitation to the next lost soul who might dare to listen. By midday the sun had risen high, but the building remained cold, untouched by its warmth. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional creak of settling wood. The kindergarten had reclaimed another keeper, and the world outside moved on, oblivious to the quiet horror that had unfolded within its walls. The music box, its tune now complete with Eliza's voice, waited patiently for the next curious visitor.